Hey Bookaholics, so welcome back to another video. Today I'm bringing you a list of series I want to reread. We've all had this problem with our TBRs where we have all of these new shiny books, these new worlds we want to visit, these new characters we want to meet, and then there's that voice in the back of your head that is nostalgically telling you to reread your favorites. And I tend to ignore that voice a lot more often than I should. So I would like to prioritize just rereading some faves over the next few years, months, whatever. So here is a list of series that I would like to prioritize in 2025. Now, I'm not planning on reading all 6 series. It's just that this is what I'm going to be pulling from. I haven't put Lord of the Rings on here because I am going to be doing a reread of that in December. Spoilers for my December TBR as part of a buddy read that we're doing over on the Brothers Gwyn Discord. So I'm not going to be putting that on this list since it is already scheduled in. So these are all the ones that as of next year, at some point, I would like to prioritize rereading. The first of which is actually a sci-fi instead of a fantasy, but it is my favorite sci-fi, and that is the saga of the Pliocene Exiles by Julian May, this first book being Many Coloured Land, and this one is a somewhat fantasy sci-fi. Let's not get too crazy. In this world, we are in the far future, and we're part of this galactic alliance of people who now have what's called metapsychic abilities, and that basically means that they have mind powers. So they have either far speaking, which means that they can speak to someone else with metapsychic abilities over huge distances. You have mind reading. We're in this far future, but there is this loophole in the time-space continuum that basically, if you go through this hole, you get sent to Pliocene Earth. But it's a one-way ticket, because obviously if you come back forwards, you just turn to dust because you would age the appropriate amount of time. So it is a hole that people get sent through if they are convicted felons, if they're prisoners. You can choose either being executed or being sent back to Pliocene Earth. It is also where people who want to have a more simplistic, less space travel-y, tech-involved life go, and anyone who wants to go through it. So we are following a group of people who are either going through or being sent through this loophole in time back to Pliocene Earth. However, when they arrive at Pliocene Earth, things are not what they should be. And it is an amazing series. We are following a huge cast of characters. We have 8 that we follow through, and then we are dealing with some of the most interesting world building. Given that it's technically time travel, the world building in here is absolutely fantastic. We deal with alien species, we deal with our own history, we deal with all of these characters and their different abilities, and if they do have or don't have metapsychic abilities. We deal with the politics of the world, and it's absolutely fascinating. This series does have a prequel series as well as a standalone that connects the two. My priority would be to reread the original 4 in the series, but if I happen to get to all 7, yay for me. So this is definitely one that I would like to prioritize reading again sometime soon. My favorite dystopian is one I also dying for a reread now. Again, haven't read at this point in half a decade, which feels bizarre to me. But that is the Newsflash series by Myra Grant. This series is one that holds a very special place in my heart anyway, because I did buddy read it with 2 of my booktube besties, which are Kayla and Eleanor, who I'll leave linked down below. And I loved this series so much. This series will always remind me of Eleanor because we spent like 2 years. Anytime either of us would mention this in a video, the other would go, and that just makes me happy. So I am very excited to give this another go. This is, as I said, a dystopia. It's a zombie story, and I don't normally like zombie stories. Check my October wrap up for further information. I don't like zombie stories normally, but I loved this one. In this world, it is about 20 years after the zombie outbreak. We have regained a semblance of civilization, and we are following a blogger named Georgia. Bloggers in this world became a lot more prominent because mainstream media trying to minimize the amount of panic that was being caused by the zombie apocalypse, but were also therefore feeding misinformation. So we had the bloggers that were the ones that were out there amongst these zombies to show what had actually happened, and they became a very trustworthy source of information. Since then, we have now a split view of mainstream media versus bloggers. And we have a presidential candidate who has decided that he wants Georgia's team to follow his campaign, which is very innovative, and it's how he is reaching out to other parts of the community, wants to garner the trust of the people because he knows that bloggers will just write it as is. He's not going to censor them or anything so that he can garner the trust of his public. We're following this presidential campaign between several candidates, and it's also how we tackle this society, this civilization, the possible repercussions of a virus that causes a zombie virus out there in the world, etc. And it was absolutely fascinating. I really loved following these characters. I love the prose, the pacing, just everything about this series, and I cannot wait to give it another run. This series is a trilogy. It also has a companion novel and a collection of short stories. The companion novel I wasn't the biggest fan of, but I would like to reread. I feel like I'd have a different appreciation for it now I know what it is. I think that I kind of resented it for not being a main trilogy in a way, so I am curious to see if I will like it more upon reread. And then the short stories were just fun. Well, not fun, they're kind of horrific, but it was great to just like dip my toes back into this world and see backstories of some of the side characters, etc. I'm gonna step away from the favorites for a brief interlude here of a series that baffles me, a series that I don't know if I like it or not. I read it, I think, in maybe 2019. I still, after all this time, have not figured out if I like this series or not. So I am going to give it hopefully a reread at some point, and that is The Witcher by Andrzej Sapkowski. There were installments in this series that I thought were absolutely amazing. There were so many characters in the like middle books that I really loved. I love Regis, I love Angoulême, I love Milva. Absolute favourite is Milva. I actually really like Cahir. I know that he is one that people have mixed feelings on. I actually really like Cahir. I'm not that fussed about Ciri, weirdly enough, but I'm very curious to see like how I'd feel about this series upon reread. See if it would clear up things for me as well. Like, see if I actually feel like any of the ending is foreshadowed, or if it's just an ending to because he needed to end it, because that's how it feels. Like, this series definitely feels like he was just like, here's a cool world, here's a cool concept. Oh crap, I've got to wrap it up somehow. Here's an ending. That's how it felt to me. So I am very curious to see if I feel the same way upon reread, or if it is actually no, that was a bit more foreshadowed. That does make a little bit more sense. But this is a 5-book series that also has 3 kind of collections of short stories. I don't actually own a Season Storm, so I probably should pick that up. A very weird experience with this series. So at some point I should probably reread it. In this series, we are following Geralt of Rivia, who is a witcher. A witcher is basically a monster hunter, and they are these mutated beings that people both want their services of but absolutely despise. And he ends up in this kind of contract where he needs to protect this girl who is part of the politics of the world, and it is his journey as a witcher and also as a somewhat adoptive father. It goes from there. I'm sure you all know what The Witcher is about. There's the video games and the TV show. Don't worry, we're coming back into favourites territory. The detour is over, and I am also going to need to reread this soon because it definitely needs to be in the colder seasons, because that's the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine Arden. This series is stunning. It's beautifully written. The settings are just some of the best I have ever read. I love the characters. I love everything about this series. It's amazing. It's Russian folklore, Christian takeover of all of Europe, and in this story it's a historical fantasy in which we are following a young girl named Vasilisa, whose father brings in a stepmother to kind of care for her, but the stepmother brings with her a priest, and the stepmother and the priest have decided that they want to vanquish all of the more pagan traditions of this village that is up in the cold north of Russia. Therefore, the village stepping away from these pagan traditions means that the pagan gods, the Domovai, can no longer aid them or hold back what is to come. It gets dark, it gets very atmospheric, it gets very heartwarming, heartbreaking. We have almost like witch hunt vibes going on, and we also have actual history happening here as well. We have the Russian country, nation, people wanting to stand up against the Mongolian Empire that is colonizing them, and we have so many things going on in this series, and I love them and I cannot wait to reread them. Another series series that I am definitely do a reread of one of my all-time favorite series, one that I read basically alongside my dad when I first read this and just loved discussing it with him. Like, it was one of my favorite reading experiences, was then just talking about this really bizarre series with him, and that is the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. This is a trilogy that consists of a world in which we have every so often a 5th season, which is total devastation. It is a natural disaster upon natural disaster in which civilization essentially gets reset. And we are following, in this first book, 3 perspectives. We are following a girl who has been sent off to this school because she has these magical abilities that people known as origins have, which is the ability to control natural disasters, especially earthquakes. They are both feared and revered, so if a child happens to show these abilities, they're sent off to this school where they're indoctrinated and schooled in how to be an origin. We are following a young woman named Cyanite who is also part of this origin school. She is put forth the notion of reproducing, so they want her to breed herself, so they give her a man that she needs to work with, but whose powers they want children for, so they lump them together on the hopes that she can produce a child of his. And then we are also following a mother who comes home to find that her husband has murdered her son and taken her daughter, and thus she begins to trace him across this whole continent to try and retrieve her daughter. We do get a perspective also in second person. It's not that it's you that as a character, it's to obscure who they're actually talking about so that you don't find it out until later. And I really did enjoy this series. It's a very strange series, it's hard to get into, but I think that this will have so much merit upon reread. I think it'll be one of those series that when I pick it up again, so many things are going to make more sense to me the second time round, and I'm really excited for that. And then the last one that I have on here as a reread is I would like to read this basically just for fun. I don't think that it's going to give me anything different upon reread. I don't think I'm going to see things that I didn't see before. It's not that kind of series. It's just one that I enjoyed and wouldn't mind giving another go, and that is The World of the First Law, with this original trilogy, The First Law by Joe Abercrombie. Again, this is another one that has sequel series that if I get to them, great, but my priority would be at least the main original trilogy, because I did read Age of Madness, which is the last series out so far, relatively recently, so I don't think I'm in a rush to reread that, but I definitely would like to go back to the original First Law trilogy at some point. This series follows 3 main perspectives. One is Logan Ninefingers, whose luck has just run out. He's a fighter from the north and he is on the run, and he then happens to encounter someone who has a very particular use for him. We're also following Giselle Dan Luther, who is a nobleman of little standing, of little importance, who has entered into this sword fighting contest where the winner would garner acclaim and glory. And then the last one we are following is Inquisitor Glockter, who hates Giselle because he used to be Giselle. However, upon being tortured in captivity after losing a battle in a war, he is now a crippled torturer, and he spends his days torturing people for information, and then one day he garners information that seems to be particularly important. And that is it. That is how this trilogy starts. And in this first book, not a huge amount happens, as I'm sure anyone who's heard of this series knows. It's just getting to know the characters and getting into their heads. The first time I read this series, the first book, took me twice. So I got halfway into this first book and DNF'd. Then I watched a review, I think it was Elliot Brooks's review, where she said you need to push through past the first half and then suddenly it'll click, and it did. And then I really liked the series. So I am hoping that won't happen this time round, because I know what I'm getting into. As a quick side note, not a series that I need to reread, but a series I need to kind of come back to, is I would like to give the Soldier Son trilogy by Robin Hobb another go. So I read the first book and halfway through the second book and then DNF'd. I was really struggling with this series, but I think I didn't have enough distance between Soldier Son and The Realm of the Eldlings, which is my favorite series. So I think I need to come back to this after it's been a little while since I've read Realm of the Eldlings. I need to come back to this one and give it another go. So that's my hope, is that I will pick up this trilogy and then actually finish it. So it's not quite a reread, because I'm not rereading the whole series. I'd only be reading book 1 and the half of book 2, and then everything else will be new. But I need to be in the right mindset for it, and I think I'm ready. I hope I'm ready, because I was really struggling and it was really making me sad. So I hope I have a better time picking it up again. This series is following Neva, who is a son of a very important, like, he's very high up in the army. He's, I think, some kind of general or something. He has expectations that his son will go in the same direction and also become a prominent military figure. This is a Native American based story in which we are following both the colonizers and Native American forces come to a head, and it's how Neva begins to understand how the war is wrong and all of these typical values that you would expect in a conflict of this type narrative. I do like the magical element to this that I think plays a decent part. I just really don't like Neva. I don't like the protagonist. So maybe now I know what he's like, I can maybe deal with him a bit better. But those are some series that I would like to reread and ones that I would like to prioritize in the near future. Let me know if you have read any of these and your thoughts on them. What's the series that is on the top of your reread pile at the moment? And that is all from me for today. So thank you ever so much for watching, and I'll catch you in another one soon. Bye!